Population. Who is where, and why should we care? Current estimated global population is approaching 7,800,000 people. Canada, where I was born and where I live, and where I will likely live until I die, has a population of 37.6 million people. To put that into global perspective, the United States has 330 million people. The city of Los Angeles in the state of California in the United States of America has roughly the same amount of people, around 35 million, I think, as Canada does in its entire country, the second geographically biggest country in the world. Developing regions make up an increasing share of the world population. Most of the population growth has been in the Asian countries. Since we've begun to enter the world of facts and statistics, I have to ask the question, is a technique such as the census accurate and honest enough to draw conclusions from and devise solutions from? Is it the best we have to work with at the moment? I suppose it is. But we know there's possibilities, especially with communication technology, that we haven't seemed to have learned to tap into as a resource to facilitate human cooperation. Humans tend to be reluctant to admit fault or guilt and have little patience or respect for surveys to begin with. So that calls the whole method of census into question. So since there are more people on the planet than ever before, that means there's more possibility for statistical error and data that's just uncollectible with these current methods. So factors such as density, distribution, and composition are being obtained through these archaic methods of checks and boxes that you get in the mail and you can decide to do or not, or put effort into it and care into it in order to get true reflective results of the current situation. If all this data is coming from surveys, we're just essentially estimating. That being said, it's pretty clear there's a lot of people on the planet and that we're having a very observable effect on the resources of the planet and on the quality of life, not just our own, but all kinds of life that is on this planet right now. That can't be ignored. The accuracy of the method to obtain that information should not truly be in question. Rather, we should maybe focus our energies on cooperating and finding a solution. In some places in the world, birth rates have actually declined as a result of such factors as urbanization and access to contraceptives. For example, in Bangladesh, life expectancy is getting longer, and the number of babies per family is getting fewer. And this is mainly because of contraceptives and education, which is shifting a cultural habit of having an overcompensating number of babies because you expected them to die. 50 years ago, a family was expected to have 5 babies. Today it's only 2.5. This is an example of the demographic transitional model. It's broken into 5 stages. Stage 1, pre-industrial equilibrium, marked by a high birth rate and a high death rate. These are pre-industrialized societies, low technology, and starting to get crammed together, which harbors disease, and it wasn't a great time to be alive. Luckily, human ingenuity jumped in. We get to stage 2, early industrialization, high birth rate, and a declining death rate. This is due to human ingenuity and innovation and cooperation. It brings us into stage 3, developed industrialization, declining birth rate, and death rate. So people are starting to figure out they don't have to have so many kids. And they're kind of busying themselves and learning to enjoy life a little bit more. This is just breeding more innovation and technological growth and moved us into stage 4, post-industrial equilibrium, low birth rate and death rate. It's kind of where we're skating out of right now. We're not peaking as far as advancements go, but we are peaking as far as accepting that 80 years is a pretty decent life. And we don't have to have 5 kids. And there is meaning and purpose, and we need to cooperate together to figure something else out soon. And I'm hoping that means we're in stage 5, or at least the very beginnings of it, which is zero population growth, because that's what's sustainable. Since we're talking about sustainability, we have to talk about impact. And if we're going to talk about impact, then we can use the IPAT. Impact equals population times affluence times technology. Human impact is a calculation of how many people times how much they consume times how technological advancements facilitate the pace we consume and the methods we use to consume or sustain population. So we're talking about population and consumption and the problems it causes. Then we have to ask, does hope exist for the HE, human environment relationship? You have to have a global perspective to answer questions like that. And you have to understand that there are countries and continents like Africa and Asia who are in different places and dealing with different problems than, say, people in North America and Europe. And inside those continents, there are equally as complex, if not more complex, diversities in all levels. Social, economic, religious. World populations are literally and figuratively all over the map as far as where they are ethically and technologically, and as far as their impact, locally and globally, on our ecosystems, which we all depend on for our survival. It's a complicated mess. So yes, it's more than just numbers. You want my geographic perspective on why I think population is more than just the numbers. I'm a 34-year-old guy who lives in a village with a population of about 2,000 people. The second largest country by land mass in the world, was 39th population-wise. I can see the ocean from here. But what I hope is that the 38 countries above mine on the list have a similar ability to see what's important and make the necessary changes individually and governmentally in order to ensure my family and future generations, not just here but globally, can be sure they have a future. So to Mexico, Russia, Bangladesh, Nigeria, Brazil, Pakistan, Indonesia, United States of America, India, and China, please take a look around you. Ask the true opinion of your people. Maybe use social media. Whatever the best technology you can muster under your unique circumstances. Maybe start by reflecting on your own affluence, consumption, and current technological state globally and locally. Once you think you have a good grasp on it, share it with your people so that they can understand, and then ask them how they feel about the future and what side of history they would like to be written into. Because the human impact on Earth is the single biggest threat, and technology alone won't save us. That is, if we don't come together. It has to be a global cooperative effort facilitated by a consciousness shift. This has to be a globally cooperative effort, not just on the individual scale, on individual commitments. It has to be facilitated and organized by an ethically minded and cooperative world governmental structure. This cannot happen only on the municipal level and be put on the people. Those who pretend to want the responsibility of running this show we call humanity need to lead and make those tough decisions, and then explain why to those who haven't quite figured it out yet. So currently we seem to be at an impasse between the why should we cares and the oh my God, are you actually that dense or greedy or heartless? It's almost like our earned and pride-worthy cultural evolution versus the currently occurring ecological crisis resulting significantly from this same evolution, battling it out for I don't know. I don't think it matters. course we should care. Because there was a lot of tomorrows to get to where we are. If we want anything better than this, we need as many tomorrows as we can possibly facilitate. Of course, this is the ethical approach. It's the only approach we should have. But it's true that there are people in the world who put other things above ethics and doing what's right. But I can only come at this with my own perspective and my own opinions. So here's some questions that I'm going to answer. How old will you be in the year 2050? I'll be 64 years old in 2050. Where do you think you will live at that time? I hope to be someplace I can fulfill my desire to have a positive, impactful relationship with the planet and its inhabitants. I hope even more that it happens to be a place like Joggins, Nova Scotia, that is rich with natural beauty and has a living legacy of community values and cooperation. What will be your chief mechanism for survival in terms of economic system, job type, salary, etc.? I've been there and done that as a motivating factor. I climbed the corporate ladder and all the pay raises that came along with it and changes in economic status. I moved all the way from broke to middle class. It was fantastic. But in the future, I just hope this positive impact stuff pays the bills, and so it should. So this stuff is impossible to predict, but you have to think about it, don't you? To be honest, I've actually been making a failed attempt to stop thinking about this stuff, as much as I have been since I started thinking. This is heavy stuff. And this information, like I mentioned before, constantly bombards the curious mind. Ignorance is bliss in this day and age. But to answer the question, yes. That's the burden of being this type of creature. You have to think about it. It's ethical. Will Mount Allison University in New Brunswick still exist and be Canada's #1 university? I'm not someone for predicting the future, but I do love to read a good futurist prediction. So I have to admit, I have read and heard some predictions that maybe facilities of higher learning as geographic locations that human bodies go to interact with professors may not exist in the future. I don't hope for this. I think there's a tangible experience that you can have in a classroom that cannot be duplicated by watching YouTube videos. Because eventually, the people who did go to these real places of higher learning and interacted with peers and asked tough questions and worked it out with groups of people who are going through similar struggles and were mentored and guided by trained professionals. Human beings who can articulate situations, complex, unique situations, and help individuals find themselves. And I hope that we don't go down a path where that's cast aside as meaningless, and that the true utility is recognized. That is having human interaction with like-minded peers and human guided tutelage and education. Even as simple as teaching people how to work their way through the questions in their own mind so they can figure it out for themselves. So I hope Mount Allison will be there forever. In this same future, did my degree help me in my life? Well, it better have. This has been the single most difficult thing I've attempted, and I do expect to finish it. It's been grueling and challenging, and this is coming from someone who would describe their early life in the same way. Certainly recognizing that I had it better than a lot of people in the world. This experience, I already know it has helped me articulate myself more effectively. And as far as illuminating and thought-provoking experiences and exposures, it's like nothing I've ever encountered in my life. So, no, I'm not rooting for the death of the physical and geographically central system that we call education. They could use some tweaking, though. The questions are getting heavier, so the answers are about to as well. Do you think the planet will be able to support 10 to 14 billion human beings during your lifetime? It has to, or it won't. This particular round of humans possesses a resiliency that has never been documented in this planet's 4.7 billion year history. We've repeatedly been absolutely devastated by disease, famine, and natural disasters of all kinds, except the unsurvivable. And even that we have managed to avoid in our current physical biological state for several hundreds of thousands of years. Someday a natural event will occur that will be unsurvivable. Maybe it's billions of years from now. And some things that are currently unsurvivable will likely become survivable in the future, fueled by our constant and consistent rate of innovation and adaptation, both of which we seem to have an intrinsically embedded desire to pursue as a species. Knowing all that, I suspect we will come together, lead, maybe even race, and compete our way to being the most successful group of survivors individually, till we inevitably realize that it is obviously in everyone's equal best interest to work as a global cooperative civilization in order to sustain what we have left by measuring, predicting, and adjusting the controllable variables to the maximally efficient and logically sustainable states, while simultaneously investing in the economy of ideas and their production and distribution where need dictates to the highest degree, and with a further, however no less crucial, regard for its risks versus reward calculations regarding sustainability and its relation to global ecological outcomes, including the well-being and supported longevity and suffering reduction of the sentient beings contained within all earthly ecosystems, to the extent that we as a species can facilitate our journey to godlike technological symbiosis in harmony with all existing life, as the shepherds of a world full of thoughtless and micro-capable yet worthy beings of nature. Observe and protect. I'm not capable of predicting if any of that will happen in my lifetime. One can only hope and dream and contribute to the global ascension into cooperative sustainability and future planning that ought to come. It is far out of our nature and will likely take some heavy shoulder-shaking kind of mind-changing events for some cultures to burst their bubble into the right one. Others have taken that step and have demonstrated their willingness to move forward, or have initiated leading by example. And this should be commended and recognized more than it currently is. List 4 or 5 problems that you think might result from a population of 10 to 14 billion. Don't get me started. Waste management, soil degradation, shoreline erosion, rising and warming seas, dehumanization, disease outbreak, food shortages, resource depletion, death, torture, waste, greed, corruption, inequality, ownership claims and disputes, war, and other mutually avoidable destructions. Thinking spatially, if there are over 10 billion people then, does that mean that the planet will be overpopulated? What is an appropriate definition of overpopulation? It depends more if it is a majority population of assholes or tree huggers, and if those tree huggers can be authoritative, open-minded, creative, self-preservatory, and equally globally preservative. And it would be less of a problem, and it could be fixed quicker if the assholes would help make deals, organize the agreements and commitments, and enforce the necessary change and guidelines, instead of whining about not getting to take advantage of the finite wealth and privileges it is currently providing them. The world's growth rate peaked in the 1960s at 2% and a doubling time of 35 years. Are you confident that slower growth rates and technology will be enough? To be honest with you, I have confidence in no things, reality included. It is both a curse and a privilege. I recommend avoiding this particular existential view of things as a being concerned with data collection and categorical sorting and all of those kinds of stuff-related things. It seems to be a bad perspective to have. To me, hope, acceptance, and virtue ethics teach me what is possible, and looking out the window shows me the same thing, but without the filter, and that I see what's possible. Allowing human fallibility to wave a chaotically maniacal hand towards me as if to say, "Come play with us. It's so much fun." But thankfully, at least I find myself asking, but at what cost? At what cost? It's not as common of a question as it ought to be. This next question seems more geared towards people who haven't attempted the Monday to Friday 9 to 5, 2 cars, a wife and a kid life. But I've already been there. But I gave it a shot anyways. You don't have to tell me in your answer, but what are your thoughts on having children? How many? Do all individuals have the right to have children during their lifetimes? If you view humans through the lens of another animal in a biosphere, then mothers should not only be able to choose the amount of children, but if the child needs to die for survival reasons, and when is the time to abandon the child to the clutches of the cruel hands of the natural world? Just as the mother brown bear does. On the other hand, if you view humans as a higher level of existential responsibilities due to our advanced grasp of ethics and logical imperatives, we have to pay a much closer look at all of our actions, because they will all have an impact on the future generations. Generations that are capable of shame, disappointment, and regret. All those things will be directed at us and the choices we're making right now. The things we know we can change now are the ones that we ought to change. That's the end of the ethical dilemma. That's the end of the ethical dilemma. That's the end of the ethical dilemma.
That's the end of the ethical dilemma.